So our next speaker is Rob Beresford, and Rob is going to talk about the conservation of critically endangered salt marie, but he is also going to be filling in for Lucy, who's unfortunately not able to be here.
Here, yeah.
It is on.
It is on.
Excellent. Cool. Okay. So, yeah, Rob Beresford, and I'm with Plant and Food Research based in Auckland. And the talk I'm going to give today is on the conservation of critically threatened swamp myrtle, Syzygium myrtle in Auckland. And I'd just like to acknowledge my, first of all, our co-workers in Auckland Council, particularly in the old Myrtle program, but co-authors of Kathy McCormick and Maria Balcova. They were friends of Bush Glen Reserve. Rebecca Fuller from Auckland Council, and Warren Willow and Ben Lawrence, who are both photographers. We've taken some photographs that I'll be showing here. So, yeah, community groups across Aotearoa, New Zealand, both Māori and non-Māori, have embraced the fight against myrtle rust with a passion in an effort to protect key native species in their local areas. However, just as these efforts have been ramping up, most of the science funding for myrtle rust came to an abrupt end in 2020. So those
No. Harry, fix it. I just like hit the floating screen. It shouldn't have any different. I can do it. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, there we go. Okay, great.
So without the support and guidance of underpinning science, the community groups are having to go it alone. But even without the science, the dedication and determination of these groups is achieving very much and providing some very heartening stories. And one of which is a story about our most severely impacted myrtle species, or one of our most. Swamp myrtle is a wetland forest species endemic to New Zealand, and even before myrtle rust arrived, its distribution had been severely restricted due to habitat destruction, land use change, and swamp drainage, of course. The natural range of swamp myrtle is from the far north to northern Marlborough, and particularly coastal areas, and not so much in the higher elevations. And the typical habitat is along the edges of watercourses on the swampy ground. And unfortunately, the upper North Island climate is very favourable for myrtle rust. You know this from other work that's been done. And swamp myrtle was first impacted, swamp myrtle forest remnants in Auckland Council reserves in early 2022. Myrtle rust having arrived in New Zealand in 2017. So it took a year or two before it started to show up in swamp myrtle. And one of the reserves, council reserves of Bush Glen, Browns Bay on Auckland's North Shore. Bush Glen Reserve is there's no, well, I can point to the screen there, but that little inset map, it's a strange shaped reserve. It's sort of an L shape with a blob on top. And the shape of the reserve is actually reflects exactly where the swamp myrtle stands are throughout that area. And it was the swamp myrtle stands that saved the whole area from housing development in about the 1990s. So it's been recognised for a long time that the swamp myrtle trees are coal that need to be protected. That's looking from that Calvicia Drive southwards up the hill. And the arrows show the swamp myrtle canopies in the reserve in 2022. So that's shortly after myrtle rust was first detected there. Friends of Bush Glen Reserve have been managing weed control, possum trapping and rat trapping in the planted swamp myrtle seedlings So that's Kathy McCormick and Maria Valkova have been leading this work. During December 2021 and January 2022, myrtle rust started to become a serious concern. All the growing tips on the juvenile trees were being killed, dieback and rust pustules all over the place. However, we couldn't tell from the ground what was happening in the tops of the mature canopies. From the ground, the upper leaf canopies actually still looked okay. There was still a lot of leaf up there, but we couldn't see what was really going on in the growing tips. So Auckland Council came in with a cherry picker, and we went up there in the bucket with the photographers and took some close-up photographs with a telephoto lens in the tops of the canopies. And it showed quite clearly that the growth was severely affected. The leaves were red blotches, those red arrows there, red blotches associated with myrtle rust, and shoots were tip dieback. So you can't see one live shoot on the top of that canopy, and they were all in the same state. They've also had all the flower clusters were dead on the tops of those trees. So this was quite devastating to find that these trees could not grow or reproduce and were in fact functionally extinct. For me, there was no way we could just let this happen without trying to save these important tones. Rebecca from Auckland Council and Kathy from Friends of Bush Glen wanted to know what would be needed to manage myrtle rust at Bush Glen and to prevent the trees from dying. So we had some science-led research which was able to help quite a lot actually to understand what was likely to happen, even though swamp miring has taken. Modelling and field research in other species showed that, for one thing, climatic risk is greatest in the upper North Island, as I've shown previously. There's a distinct seasonality, with rust being less active in the cooler months, and that is reflected in the iNaturalist observations, which is iNaturalist being New Zealand's source of distribution information around. So you can see from that graph from the bottom there, June, July, August and September, very few observations, very little activity, and then it slowly ramps up through to January where it peaks. And furthermore, in the upper North Island, there are these two infection waves which occur each season. One on the spring growth flush, and then a second on the regrowth. So the spring growth flush is all killed by myrtle rust, and then there's some regrowth in the autumn, which gives another peak of infection. We also know that host growth patterns determine the seasonal time of myrtle rust epidemics, because the fungus requires young actively expanding tissues to affect. So for swamp miring bush, we need to monitor rust activity and help the plants to better understand myrtle rust seasonality and impact at the site. So the possibility of managing myrtle rust, well, disease management is obviously challenging for a rust disease in the natural environment. Although various management options are being researched, the reality is that fungicides are the only certain way to mitigate the impact of rust in the time frame that would say pretty good. The Ministry for Primary Industries had funded fungicide trials, and there's a report being written on that risk-based fungicide management from the universities. There's actually another report just being finished too on alternatives to fungicide. So we knew that modern synthetic fungicides were highly effective against myrtle rust, and we knew when they needed to be applied under New Zealand conditions. So the Swamp Miring Conservation Project was formed with three objectives. The first was to save the juvenile trees of bush trees and, if possible, lower branches of mature trees using fungicides to protect growth and flowers and fruit. The second objective was to assess the effects of fungicide spraying by monitoring changes in plant health and myrtle rust activity. And objective three, which is a long-term one, was to collect seed and raise swamp miring seedlings to screen for types with possible resistance to myrtle rust. Since April 2022, the Friends of Bush Glen have been using three different synthetic fungicides in rotation, each from a different mode of action to minimise the risk of fungicide resistance developing. And so the friends are all growth safe trained, so they've trained courses on how to do negative chemical spraying. Spraying's done with a 2.5 metre boom, reaching branches up to 4 metres below the ground. So over 3 years, from April 2022 to March 2025, there have been 25 spraying cycles. There's 2 to 3 weekly during summer and 1 to 3 monthly during the months or late autumn and the spring. Now, assessment methods, we need to monitor what these fungicides are doing. We looked at other methods developed in New Zealand which are available, but they tended to be rather complicated. And Kathy had been, each time she sprayed, she'd made notes, and from these we developed a relative 0 to 10 scale so that her observations could be very precise. So the randomized monitoring protocol includes these 4 variables. The overall leaf canopy health, the presence of new growth, presence of active rust, pustules that is, on the juvenile trees, shoot dieback and dead flower clusters on the mature trees, flower and fruit development stages on the mature trees. And it's clearly quite difficult to see what there is up in the tops of mature trees, so it's kind of challenging some of that is. But this just shows the first 2 years of monitoring data, which is over 2 seasons, and the green line being the new growth, and active rust is the yellow line there. And you can see that well, the fungicides suppressed, but they're not completely eliminated with rust, so they're written. In both years, new growth occurred from April to November, when cool temperatures limited rust activity. So when it was cooler, there was quite a lot of new growth even through the winter, but rust increased on the new growth from October, peaking in January and then declining. Now remember, these trees are actually sprayed, these young trees, so we didn't actually see that double peak pattern that we get in the completely unsprayed trees. So even with rust present, the juvenile sprayed trees grew well and didn't have any shoot dieback. So the fungicides were very effective, particularly those young trees. In the third year, which was 24-25, the year just finished, there was a very different pattern actually. Less new growth and less rust with a very different weather pattern during summer 24-25. What we had, this looks at the accumulated Myrtle rust risk from the Myrtle rust process model, so it's a predicted risk that summarizes the weather suitability for Myrtle rust. It shows that in those 3 years there was a huge variation in the amount of risk. So in the 22-23 year, very high, and then much less in 24-25 particularly, there was a prolonged drought in January and February 2025, accounting for that low risk. And those patterns are rather reflected in the iNaturalist observations, which show far more observations noted in 24-23 and relatively few in a slightly rather different pattern in 24-25. So spraying of mature trees has allowed seed production. So the mature trees, we only were able to spray a few lower branches on those. Sprayed trees, sprayed flower clusters on the left there and the right. The flower cluster was so susceptible to Myrtle rust that the around they all go down with a very low. But the sprayed flower clusters survived well, and they were actually able to produce ripe fruit. So the fruit has been collected for 2 years now, and seedlings are being raised. Just to look at the mature trees and the impact of the rust there, here's one of the ground sprayed branches on the mature tree, and then up in the top here we've got severe canopy decline in foliage density and death of branches. And indeed, you can see the devastating impacts of Myrtle rust here on the mature trees. February 22, that's the photograph I showed before, and then May 2025, that tree, same tree, has lost all its lower branches, and there's still some growth up in the very, very top, but it's on the way. And now just another illustration of the impacts of Waiheke Island on the eastern end at Myrtle Bay. There's a number of streams that run down into the bay, and that one's in there is got quite a good stand of swamp iron trees in it. So these photographs, well, these images are from Auckland Council geomaps. In 2017, which was the year Myrtle was derived here, those trees and it's the lighter canopies there that running up that stream valley were looking fine. In 2025, they look like that much and gone up on the hill with photograph of them. It shows that. So that whole stand of trees are well on the way to death, but there are some smaller trees under the main canopy which don't look quite so bad, but still there's no new growth. And here's another story which is a bit more heartening. Private property near Karaka, down here in the south of Auckland, where Ray Back planted swamp iron trees 20 years ago, and he's been spraying those since 2021, and is now growing seed that was in a seed. So very remarkable to be able to show you a photograph taken in 2024 of a tall swamp iron tree that's showing actually no sign of movement. And just to the right of Ray's head in the photograph, there's a couple of yellow, a couple of red dots, and those are ripe fruit clusters. So learnings from these 3 years of community work at Bush Glen. Oversight program on the juvenile affairs has successfully protected the young shoots and allowed fight growth. Resistance screening for the seedlings is being developed in conjunction with Pest Free Kaipātiki, and we'll talk a little bit more about that after my talk. For mature trees, it's not possible to spray the whole heap of things. That's clear. On the sprayed branches, it's not necessary to completely suppress myrtle rust and cheap flowering and seed production. So if you can reach some of the branches from the ground with a sprayer, you've got a very good chance of keeping the myrtle rust off the flowers and flower buds. So it seems to me that when the conservation work is led by the local community, the enthusiasm and dedication they bring to achieve longer-term outcomes than are possible under conventionally funded scientific research programs. They tend to have much better continuity than we can in science, even though climate funding is always a struggle for everybody. And I'm just going to finish off with a quote, because I think this is quite profound. This is a quote by Jenny Fenwick on Waiheke Island, where forest conservation and predator eradication have enabled the release of kiwi for the first time in urban Auckland. And it's a project that's been come under Te Koroa Ngāti Power and Ki Tamaki and Department of Conservation. She said, if you really put your heart and soul into a vision and dream big, you don't necessarily have an end goal in sight, and you just start doing the right things, amazing things can happen. And I think that's really quite profound for a lot of this community-led work.
Any questions?
Thank you, Rob. I really enjoyed that talk. I'm Alice from University of Queensland. I wondered if people had been looking at the impacts on the riparian bank and water management in those areas where the swamp mire is seeing declining.
We talk about that often, but there's never been any interest to put any money up to actually carry out any monitoring. Because obviously we're concerned about the use of the fungicides as well in that context. And I wish we could do it. I wish we could look at the invertebrate fauna and so on.
Hi, Rob. Have there been any observations of potentially resistant or tolerant plants at any of those sites?
Well, we don't know. There are some younger plants at some of the sites which are not killed by Myrtle, even when the older ones are. But at the same time, they're still being attacked because they tend not to have any new growth. Maybe they have some new growth, like all the plants have new growth over the winter months when the Myrtle is not active. Anyway, that's the whole purpose of this seedling screening exercise that we're getting. So I was just say, in addition to that one, though, for one of the other species, Lactomertus reticulata, we do find resistant types in the wild. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to kind of ask someone listen to that, but this on the genetics of the species, because it's very fragmented, its growth habit seems now. Has there been any sort of population level genetics done to know, how diverse they are? I think it has been done. I just can't remember.
Yeah, they have, and I'm not the person that knows most about it. Perhaps even Sarah sitting next to you might have some insights into that. My understanding was that they did do a genetic diversity analysis, and they found 3 particular distinct types, which separated out geographically across the North Island.
Yeah, Rob, thank you for that. Awesome. Just a question, maybe it's obvious, but would you mind repeating or letting us know which fungicides were successful? And can we buy it off the shelf at the local store or whatever?
Yeah, no, there are some, well, quite a large number actually. There's 3 fungicide groups, group 3, group 7 and group 11. That means anything to you. And there's one particular product, more than one, there's a particular product called Yates Fungus Fighter, which you can actually buy it in Australia too, actually. You can buy it off the shelf in garden shops. But it's, I said we were rotating 3 different groups in our use of fungicides. You mustn't use the same one repeatedly of these types of fungicides because that's resistant. Yeah.
Thank you.
Last question. Thanks, Rob. Always enjoy your talks. Did you report any negative impacts of using the fungicide use? Because if we think about using them in our native environment and ecosystems, anything that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, well, as I said just before, we haven't had an opportunity to look at, any off-target effects from them. Fungicides, if you look at their, safety data sheets, they will look pretty scary in terms of aquatic life and toxicology and those kind of things. So, we're aware of the impacts. We haven't had a chance to look at them. We do have spraying as targeted away as we possibly can.
Rob, that's Rob for the next up.
So my understanding is, in fact, I know that Lucy, the next speaker, is not here. She's unwell, unfortunately. I've got another couple of slides. So she was going to be talking about the Pest Free Kaipātiki and the work that they're doing at another reserve called Syzygium Bush. So,
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
it's okay. But we have got a couple of other people in the audience here from Pest Free Kaipātiki. I'm Jack over here.
So,
You can come forward, Jack, that would be helpful. And Myrtle is here as well. If you want to come up and say anything, so let's see, here we go. Yeah, so I'll just show us a couple of slides. So in addition to Bush Glen Reserve, which is up on the top right of the little map of Auckland, there's a number of, and that's the Friends Bush Glen Reserve. There's a number of other sites where myrtle rust community groups are also very concerned about myrtle rust.
We do need to click on it. Yep.
There's another reserve, Adar Reserve, Kōtara Vale, which has also got swamp mire in the trees which are affected by myrtle rust. There's Eskdale Reserve, and that one has got some very severely affected mature trees. It's heartbreaking to go in there and look at them there. It's really much from the last years. There's also Cecily Bush, looked after by Pest Free Kaipātiki Restoration Society. And then there's another one I'll just show down here, which is Oakley Creek in Mount Albert as well.
And before you go on to the next slide, for those of you not from here, I wanted to show you where we are, which is right here. So just for reference, this little kind of green patch is the park on that side. So this is all kind of north of us right now.
Yeah, well done. Thanks for that. So moving on to Cecily Bush. Yeah, I'm not sure where she correct me if I say people will add to what I'm going to say, but the Pest Free Kaipātiki Restoration Society is a large and strong community group on the North Shore. Focus has mainly been on predator control, weed control, and this sort of things, but they've really embraced the work threat in the small island trees. Here's a photo actually of the group. That's Tamila, who's here in the front. Lucy, who hasn't been able to be with us, has got the red t-shirt on. And you can recognise Jack, but towels above the rest. And then there's Jack's mum on the right there. And also Naya, who's also been, she should be and then there's Catherine McCormick again from Bush Glen there as well. And that's Ray Bax standing in the background there. So that's the team. And one of the things that this group have really taken on, well, they've spraying since October 2024 of myrtle rust, and Jack does on the spraying shop. I'll leave it. They're getting ready to do the first spraying in October. And then that's just some developing fruit on the sprayed trees. And that's Jack in action then. All suited up and doing it all according to by the book, so that's really good. The third objective for this project is actually the seedling screening. So once we can actually get fruit and seeds extracted from these mature trees, we've been planting. And there's several hundred, I think, from the last year.
Just over 300.
Just over 300 and maybe even more, because I've got a whole lot of stuff as well. So we're now producing quite large numbers of seedlings, which at this stage are still tiny. But sometime in the coming approaching season, we're going to be putting them in pots out of Pest Free Kaipātiki. Do you want to say a few words about what's going on there, or you can talk about the spraying or whatever you like?
Sure. Kia ora, everyone. So, our primary goal, of course, is to be able to protect the trees well enough to produce fertile fruit. So we have just over 300 tree down from the previous summer. These have been largely propagated across multiple different groups. My family had a few stragglers from the primary collection firstly, but others are in the hands of Maria Valkova from Rob's Bush Glen discussion earlier, and then Pest Free Kaipātiki themselves. So the administering of our spraying, of course, is a bit variable due to the nature of swamp mire being a wetland species, and wetlands being, of course, quite ecologically sensitive. And the 3 different fungicides that we use, isopyrazine, trifoxystrobin and tridimenol can cause quite serious negative effects, particularly to freshwater species. So we have to be quite specific with the targeting of what parts of trees we can spray and whether we can spray them at all. So not all of our trees, which number just over 50 in about 14 different clusters within the Cecil ED site, can be sprayed. But for those that can be sprayed, there is a quite clear visual distinction between parts that we are able to spray with fungicide and those that we are not. We have other limitations, of course, as despite me towering above the rest of the staff, I am limited in my reach and cannot quite get to the heights of the 5 to 6 meter trees that we have within our site. And some of them are in rather tight-knit canopies, where carcatia trees surrounding them, for instance, can obstruct some of our spraying. And of course, weather concerns regarding wind and rain, we cannot allow for any potential runoff of these potentially hazardous chemicals into a sensitive freshly for the environment. Otherwise, everything we seem to report and signage as this is a public accessible area with the trees visible and touchable from a public boardwalk. So we have to make sure, of course, all precautions are in place, make sure the health of not only our ecology, but also the public.
Great, thank you very much. I just wonder if Naya wanted to say anything about the preparations she's doing for the seedling screening work. You like to do anything to that?
So this berries were collected over the summer, with the navigating, and we're preparing to grow them in an area at the community centre and screen them for resistance. So the sort of budget and funding for that is in discussion, and as part of that, something that's been really exciting is bringing people together to talk about how best to grow the seedlings. And so we've got some protocols coming together. It's been, like, as Rob said, a really heart and soul driven initiative. I've been really touched to see, like, Ray Swamp, he comes out and says, "Oh, I'm not a scientist, but I've noticed that if you plant the swamp ivy next to Manukau, particularly on the south side, they seem to grow better." So it's been a sort of grounded initiative, and it's been so to see that knowledge coming together. Is there any other aspects to talk to you about?
At this stage, it probably covers where we're up to, doesn't it?
Yeah. But ideally, there's been a little bit of discussion as well about getting other community groups involved, like friends like Retweet, the other map. So I think there's potential to really expand this and draw on the local knowledge that is out there.
And I just say that the time is of the essence for this, because these trees are in decline, all of them, and so we don't have a lot of time. Okay, good.
Any questions?
Have you thought about using drones instead of like spraying plants?
That's a very good one, actually. The site at Waiheke that I showed you at the Marvin it's private property.
Pause for a second. Can you repeat the question into the microphone? So the online.
Sorry, just asked if you thought of using drones for the spray application.
So at that Marvin base site on Waiheke, the landowner was concerned about those trees, and he approached Auckland Council to see if anything could be done. And there's whatever drone spraying. And we did quite a lot of work a couple of months ago around that, getting some quotations and things for it. Turned out it was going to be about $5,000 per visit. to spray. And no one's put any money. And so at this stage, I think you'd have to conclude that the cost of operating drones is probably going to prohibit this kind of metal rust spraying. You may have had some experience with that yourself, Graham. Any comments on that?
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Good, thank you for an amazing talk. In terms of growing the maire tawaki, the swamp maire, from seed germination, at what point, so how many years old before they start maturing enough to start producing seed themselves?
Yeah, that's a good question. It varies a lot, but it's quite a long period actually. I think we can't say for sure, but it's at least 5 years, I would say. Well, maybe more, maybe even 10 years. And it's very interesting germinating seeds and producing seedlings too, because they have very slow germination. About 6 months for a batch of seeds for the whole population of those that will germinate. So they grow very slowly. And although it's a swamp species, I can say for sure that the young seedlings don't like too much water. You water them like you don't water any other small seedlings, so they don't want to be in a saturated environment.
Well, I think with that we will move to thank Rob and Pest Free Kaipātiki, and we will hand it over to Jenny.
Thank you, everyone. It's tea time. I'll put up a slide telling people joining us online that it's tea time. But if you can just make your way back and then see if you can be on the left. Did Mark already here? Do you want to do something at the Kai? That would be great. Excellent. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll be back here at 11.